So Mitski has dropped her 8th studio record, Nothing's About to Happen to Me. It's a sonic continuation of her last piece, The Land is Inhospitable and So Are We. And this one's a very conceptual narrative record. It was produced with Patrick Hyland. Mitski has made yet another introspective and rich record that really just sounds amazing on speakers. This album has an interesting mix of comedy and existential horror to it. It meditates on ideas about legacy and loneliness. These are concepts that she has touched on before, but this time with more polish and personality. You guys know the drill. I'm going to discuss the record and give my honest thoughts on it before going track by track and assigning a score. My overall thoughts on this record. I've never covered Mitski on here. I've been a fan since seeing her open for Lorde all the way back during the Melodrama World Tour. She has always been this artist that I listen to on my own time. I don't review her publicly, but that kind of had to change because she's more or less blown up now. 2 years ago, My Love, Mine All Mine blew up, like it even charted on the Hot 100. She'd always sort of been like a hidden gem amongst the indie music crowd, but now she's just really mainstream. One would imagine that Mitski would stand herself down and make something that was very accessible to capitalize off the success, but I'm glad that she didn't. Nothing's About to Happen to Me is just as dense and lyrically driven as her other records. She's brought back the producer, as I mentioned earlier, as well as the touring band for the instrumentation. But I really do think throughout the record she branches away from the sound of that album and avoids sounding like she has leftovers or B-sides from that album. If there's any past records that she revisits on here, it's Bury Me at Makeout Creek. Those guitar breakdowns and the gnarly sounds are back, but they're tinged with a version of Mitski that's a little bit more jaded and weathered down by fame. The story of this record is centered around this character that she's invented. She's a woman that lives in a house that is falling apart. She confronts ghosts, visions of death, and this deep-seated anger and paranoia that has kind of taken over her life and left her alone. Much of the album posits whether or not death, physical or metaphorical, is the only way out. Haran's Obol, the penultimate track, refers to this Greek and Roman tradition where one puts a coin in the mouth of the dead to pay off Haran, who is the ferryman of the underworld. The track recounts dogs of the previous owner's house who'd passed in the house that she lives in, and her kind of coming to terms with being a part of this ritual as the token and the keeper. By feeding the dog, she allows the spirits in the house to kind of move on in its own way, and there are many different stories here, but that one I felt was the one that was most tied to death. Another theme has to be unrequited relationships, yearning to be wanted by someone who just doesn't love her back or doesn't know how to love her back in the way that she needs. And consequently, the narrator's inability to let go drives much of the story. This record takes place mostly in one space, which is the home, which is sort of like a psychic prison and also at times a sanctuary to the protagonist. Each song sort of feels like a room in that house or a chapter in this woman's life. Mitski uses a mix of orchestral magic, fuzzy rock, steely country, and even jazzy organs to lend some color and texture to this space. I often see the words concept album thrown around these days, and it's more of a marketing gimmick, but here I feel like Mitski commits to curating a world of metaphor, and this is truly sort of a literary work. Some Mitski fans are gonna kill me for this, but I actually think this might be her best written record to date. I think that she's always been a master at short and punchy lyricism, but never at the risk of sounding crude or lazy. This ability to bring out these lyrics to life through instrumentation and emotion and the raw quality of her voice, those elements are shown best when she sings "In a Big City You Can Start Over" lively city noises and horns during the opening track In a Lake. And there are other moments too, but she just knows how to make the music feel cinematic, taking control of atmosphere to put listeners where she needs them to be. I feel like this was also executed pretty well on The Land with the sparse Americana sound, but this one feels a little bit more textured because of the genre diversity. All Change For You remains one of my top tracks and a career highlight in my opinion. I think it's a masterstroke in a line of tracks that have always been sort of about pathetically loving someone. It is very lush and rich. It has a bossa nova sound. It's very dreamily constructed. That second verse about being at a bar alone, loitering outside, waiting for the cars to pass by like a child waiting for her ride. I think those lines speak to the title, Nothing's About to Happen to Me, and this realization that sometimes things never change. And this album is sort of about the consequences of that and the realization that she's promising to change for this person, but inherently she just can't. There's a deep-seated attitude that ends up becoming a microcosmic tragedy at its core. I could say that this entire album is a must listen, but my current standouts are In a Lake, Cats, Instead of Here, I'll Change for You, and Lightning. These 5 just really struck a chord with me on first listen, but I suspect that my favorites will change as time passes. At just 34 minutes, it's a quick listen, but I ended up looping this over and over again. And now for my track-by-track analysis, I'm going to take my time and just talk about each track and what I felt about it. In a Lake sets the tone so elegantly. It's just waxing poetic about hating the idea of living in a small town, which I just personally related to a lot. The specific grace notes about one brand of soap being sold in town and it leading to someone always smelling like your first time around really sells how mundane it is. The chorus has this backstroke forever line that I just found to be one of the most beautiful lines on this whole record. The image of the sky above representing the future and the dark that she's swimming past representing that past as she goes to the city. It's just visually arresting. Verse 2 has this clever line about memory lane being hard to stay off in a small town. The small town might be a representation of nostalgia and the old, whereas big cities are what has not been seen yet. In a small town, you get a reputation pretty fast, something that she sings about. Her character has broken too many rules, so people back home feed into this idea of that reputation by treating her worse than they normally would. I just really love that final chorus because it incorporates the sounds of the city and it kind of completes the journey, but also shows off how these sounds can be comforting. Ultimately, the narrator has moved to the city because being anonymous as a small fish in a big pond where no one knows you, it's a luxury to them. Where's My Phone is an anxious car crash of a song. I think the opening chorus sets up this irony of the phone being lost, but also the identity of the singer being lost. Oftentimes, our entire being is just distilled into an object, in this case, the phone, and it's just very easy to lose because the physical form is small. Verse 1 shows how this character is a clear glass with nothing in their head, or that's what they want to be. The "someone will save me" line actually made me think of nobody, but there's awareness. At every turn, I learn that no one will. The second verse has a deliberately censored fuck in there that I thought felt in line with the character's dissociation. This narrator wants to conform and crystallize like a bug in melted amber of a citronella candle. You know, the clear wax and the clear glass are meant to be the surrender to information overload. It almost feels like she wants to get a lobotomy because thoughtlessness, intellectual death is preferable to feeling and knowing everything. So that's kind of why she needs her phone to anchor herself and drown out the noise. Cats is this sleepy track where the chorus touches on this inability to leave someone and delegating that breakup to them. She imagines 2 cats sleeping by her side at no risk of leaving her. Verse 1 has the other saying that it's just hard for them to keep this relationship going, but to the narrator, it's very simple. What else could be simple is this other deciding to just leave one day. But it also feels like an acceptance that she has tried too hard to change and that it could actually be her fault because her lover wanted someone who wouldn't change for them. But that's someone who she can't be. The chorus kind of shifts, revealing that the cats that she's singing about are rescues. She sings that she still won't be the one to go, but the cats are with her, and then the song ends with her imagining that the cats and her lover will be gone one day. She'll truly be alone, but happy that the cats are following their heart together. At least they get to lean on each other the way that she wishes this person would have leaned on her. If I Leave is an emo track where her voice is contrasted by this haunting bass line that kind of feels circular. She starts painting herself as someone who could be replaced, but her lover is someone who is the only person who understands and puts up with her. Verse 1 is where she kind of invokes different places. People on the street, the mall, the bar, her family, her friends. They don't get her. She's like all alone and completely dependent on her lover, who is the only person who accepts her as is. The second chorus kind of shifts the word forgive to see. This lover knows everything about her. She's invested way too much of her own information within him or her. The track eventually explodes and unravels in the bridge as she sings about this tunnel, which is a metaphor for her struggles. I think it is this dread that won't leave her, and it sonically represents an underworld of sorts. The song ends on this note that she knows that they could leave her for someone less complicated, but she won't give up on them because she still sort of relies on their relief. Dead Women touches on the record's running theme of death. This song kind of plays with that infamous dead wife trope that is often seen in fiction. Verse 1 is sort of an anxious ramble, imagining how her lover might wish that she was dead, therefore she would be simpler to understand, and they could kind of write her story themselves using memories and leftover belongings. Verse 2 references Virginia Woolf, a famous author who infamously died by drowning herself with stones in her pocket. I think that this track is just so well constructed. The chorus being wordless, where her voice works with the instrumental, feels dissociative, but it's also intentional. Dead women don't have words left to sing, but they still haunt the narrative. Verse 3 has a neat reference to the infamous 27 Club with that line, "Stab me 27 times," where she kind of imagines those paying respect may be embalming her just to sell off and steal her possessions. That's a running theme in this record. A lot of times she kind of imagines people robbing her grave. Then we have some lines like, "She gave her life so we could have her in our dreams or fuck her as we please," which just feel very confessional because they touch on her real life anxieties as being only seen as an entertainer and not a human making art. Instead of here is the halfway point of the record. It has this calm but pointed energy to it. The church organ lends this very deftly peace and liminal energy to the track. The character she's singing about is too anxious to answer the door, so she just pretends that she's not here because of this fear of violation and perception, which, ultimately leads to her being solitary. Verse 2 ties it back to death. She imagines being so close to dying by her own hand that death itself was crouching next to her. Death tells her that her attempt had failed, she was just a child, and they're waiting because she will try again. She searches for meaning in the stars at one point, but they just don't answer back. Song ends on such a sad note where she just goes to a place where nobody can reach, shut out from the world, but aware now of the consequences of that. She may not be dead, but at least she's free in this, space that she set up for herself. I'll change for you. I already sang some praises about it, but it is just very beautiful in the sense that you can transpose yourself into the song. I found this track to sort of be the my love, mine all mine, not sonically, but in terms of relatability. The way that the verses are just so short, but so lived in, just really struck me. You can picture her or yourself calling up an ex drunk or going out to the bar and wallowing into the morning. The chorus of the song is just so beautifully sung. I just had chills the entire time, and the soft little percussion in the back towards the end adds some crispness before the close. I love the track. Rules is the one that people will say sounds most like The Land. It's very jaunty and playful, the twang of the guitars and the horns that come in jokingly at that first rule. The chorus is her counting up the rules. There are 5. 1, that she will come over dressed as how they like. 2, they'll be gentle. 3, she'll be ruined. 4, she'll just be no one's anyone. And then 5, she'll be along for a long time and only crying out of the grief of that. And then the cycle repeats with new haircuts, and eventually the morning sun will wake her up, and the routine happens all over again until she dies. There's a fun little instrumental break in it that's the cherry on top for me. It's my favorite moment because it's a little way for her band to showcase their versatility and add some levity to the track. That White Cat is an outburst of passion and fire. The instrumental really carries the rage of the track. I think it correlates most with the cover of the record. There's a really frantic energy here where she uses the imagery of that white neighborhood cat marking up the character's home as his to touch on what fame has kind of done to her. This cat just decides one day to encroach on her territory, and there's nothing she can do about it. She thinks to herself that her mom had once told her that possessions may leave her, but the lived experiences won't. But she also has words back that what happens when she dies? What does she hold to when she dies? The chorus lacking words kind of ties back to dead women. Verse 2 is a pretty interesting verse because it has this kind of Aesop vibe to it. It's just not the cat anymore taking advantage of her people pleasing. It's the wasp that lives in her roof, and the family of possums, and the bugs who drink her blood, and the birds that eat those bugs. But ultimately, that white cat, the initial person that encroached on her territory, gets the bird. And it's this cycle that she has joined and she just can't leave. Whether the cat is us, the fans, or her lover, or society at large, or whatever is up to you. But at the end of the day, there's rent to be paid and rage behind that. Haran's obol contrasts this obligation with a ritual. Instead, the narrator here makes peace with dogs that come and visit the house. These dogs could be the actual pets of the past owners or actual dogs, but she still feeds them regardless in the evening. And she does this because she finds kinship with these dogs' loyalty and their inability to let go. She indulges them and cares for them the way that she wishes someone would care for her because she sees herself in them. One day when she was lost in that dark, the dark that she sings about in If I Leave, that was the moment that she first saw them, and that last chorus poses that she nearly died like those girls, but she's alive, and the price of still living is to play the role of the coin and the giver of the ritual. The dogs may come to her as her pets, or they might eventually just let go and leave, but until they do so, she's the ferryman, allowing these women's spirits to rest in peace. Their dogs, their remnants, their legacy is being cared for by someone who doesn't have an agenda, which is something that she wishes for herself throughout the entire album. Lightning represents the end of the record and likely the narrator's life itself. Death in the form of lightning has come to reap her, it hitting so close that it chases the rains of renewal. She takes some time to ponder the rain and what rebirth would mean. Would she be the rain to see the world again by falling again? Would she be reborn as the dark that she was once so afraid of to reflect the moonlight? She waits for the lightning to come, and the use of polo at the end probably is a nod to that game Marco Polo, where she calls out for death to finally meet and find her on her terms, which I think is a beautiful way to end the record. Upon putting together the metaphors that I could find within the last few days, and I'm sure that there's way more to find here, I thought that this album is brilliant. I think it's a wonderful record and another high mark in her discography. There's almost like a mythical energy to it almost, but it's also very grounded in truths unknown to us until, well, something happens to us. I personally would give it a 9.2 out of 10, and I highly recommend go listen to it. And yeah, that's my sort of dissection slash ramble about this album. Mitski is one of my favorite artists, so this is the first time that I've recorded a video about her, surprisingly. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you thought about the album, your thoughts, your favorite tracks, ideas and metaphors that you saw in it that I didn't. A quick shout out to my members. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. A shout out to my subscribers. I love you guys. This is why I do it for you. And I hope to see you next video. I might drop a short Bruno Mars review, but if you don't see it on here, you might see it on my Substack, which you guys should subscribe to for written reviews and random thoughts and musings and concert stuff that I go to. Anyway, I hope to see you next video. Love you guys. Bye.